You're going to pay for what you did to me. And you're going to leave me the hell alone. That's what you're going to do. Because I ain't going nowhere. You best believe it.
Months after she, Tanya Saucier, posted this video to Facebook, she allegedly shot her estranged husband to death outside of a courthouse, just moments after finalizing their divorce. But behind this tragic killing may lie a tumultuous marriage plagued by allegations of domestic violence. We're going to break down the details of this tragic case right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Just moments after this couple, Tanya and James Saucier, finalized their divorce, James was abruptly shot to death. This was right outside of the Pearl River County Courthouse in Mississippi. His killer, authorities and witnesses say, that would be none other than Tanya. 49-year-old Tanya Saucier was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, but according to court documents, this incident may have come after a history of alleged violence between these two individuals, and that ultimately culminated in this divorce. But before we even get into those accusations, I got to take you back to the day that James died, December 19th. So Tanya and James were both due in court at separate times that morning for a divorce hearing. In fact, according to Tanya's former attorney, Jansen Owen, who spoke to WLX News, the reason they were separated was because of how volatile their relationship was at this point. And Owen said that they were not even in the same room during the hearing. So according to Fox 8, Tanya arrives at this courthouse at around 10 a.m. and then leaves at around 10:30 a.m. And she was told to leave. James reportedly arrives around 11 a.m. and this was all to finalize paperwork. So what happens? Well, apparently Tanya didn't leave. No, she was reportedly seen waiting in her truck in the parking lot. Now, as James exits the courthouse at around 12:15 p.m., that's when gunshots reportedly rang out. Witnesses, including Owen, reported hearing several shots and described it just a scene of chaos. In fact, Owen told WLOX, "I was leaving the building and Mr. James Ray was leaving right behind me when I heard gunfire and ultimately determined that Miss Tanya had opened fire. I saw her continue to shoot at Mr. James Ray. She approached me, at which point I grabbed her and held her against the vehicle." Yeah, Owen was able to apparently keep Tanya detained until law enforcement arrived and took her into custody. So at this point, a lot more to break down here. I want to bring on friend of the show, criminal defense attorney Anthony Osso, who in his experience has dealt with a lot of these kinds of domestic violence issues. I mean, Anthony, thanks so much for coming on. I just got to get your initial impressions on this. I mean, what do you make of this woman allegedly killing her ex-husband right after the two of them had officially divorced right outside the courthouse?
You know, Jesse, it sounds eerily similar to James Grisham's A Time to Kill. The courthouse killing in Mississippi over something that could have been produced by some serious emotional feelings towards the other person. So that's my initial impression. And I kind of want to know the backstory between Tanya and James Ray.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I'm going to give everybody the backstory about them. And also, by the way, you know, the courthouse maybe wasn't properly equipped in a way it should have been. We'll get to that in a second. So there were apparently other witnesses there. Yeah, in fact, according to the Sun-Herald, courthouse employees, namely 4 women from the Chancery Clerk's office, they rushed to save James' life or tried to save his life. They rushed to his side. They applied pressure to his wounds. They even used Owen's tie as a tourniquet. The Pearl River County Chancery Court Clerk, Melinda Bowman, spoke to WLX about the efforts of her staff, saying they were all ministering to him. Yesterday was the greatest example of them going above and beyond. So according to the Pearl River County Sheriff's Department, by the time police arrived, it was too late to save James. He was pronounced dead at the scene. And Owen later described the shooting as a cold-blooded execution. And he added that what he saw yesterday is unjustifiable. And he said, "I witnessed her murder him." So, Anthony, I want to ask you about this key witness here, Tanya's former attorney, Mr. Owen. How valuable is it to the state's case to have a witness who was literally caught up in the violence, not to mention, you know, the other bystanders who were around?
I think it's hugely important from the state's perspective. My understanding was her divorce lawyer. Which leads me to think that he's got kind of a firsthand account of the nature of the relationship between Tanya and James Ray. In a case like this, where you've got prior domestic violence and the defense will probably lean into that domestic violence, it's going to be important for the state to utilize a witness like her lawyer.
What a story, right? My gosh. Well, we are fortunate to be able to shed a light on this one, and we're able to do that because of the support that we get from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. Now, let me tell you the deal here. If you should get injured, maybe you would want America's largest injury law firm on your side, right? You have to know what your legal rights are, whether you can be compensated. Morgan & Morgan has a dedicated team of over 1,000 attorneys. They have an incredible track record, like recent verdicts of $12 million in Florida and $26 million in Philadelphia. These, by the way, were higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. There's no upfront fee. They only get paid if you get paid. And the whole process can be done right from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. But I am curious, in such a traumatic event like that, a shooting, people's recollection can either be pinpoint, they have tunnel vision, they remember everything exact, or it could be so frantic their memory might not be exactly accurate. What is your experience with that?
I completely agree. It's the flight or fight kind of response. You've got a lot of adrenaline pumping. Potentially, you can be in shock due to the trauma that you're observing at that time. So it can go kind of one of two ways. Like you said, he can either have a really good firsthand account or some of the details can be missing. But the facts seem pretty clear as to what happened in front of the courthouse. And I think where he'll come into play significantly is sort of the backstory between Tanya and James Ray.
Well, talking about witnesses here, there's something before we even get into the background between these two.
Yeah.
Something I have to mention, something kind of surprising about this specific courthouse in Pearl River County. Apparently doesn't have security cameras installed on the outside of the building. And we know this because WLOX reported that they had asked the courthouse if they could view any footage, that may have captured the scene. And they were told there's no cameras. And this has apparently been a concern at this courthouse prior to this. Pearl River County Sheriff Major Scott Ale did address the camera issue in a statement saying, "We do have some funding that we procured through federal appropriations that the Sheriff's Office is working with the County Administrator and Board of Supervisors to address the camera issue and other security measures," and added, "There is a recognized need for enhanced security measures there." Anthony, what do you think about that?
I think it toes the line with being completely negligent. I mean, at a courthouse, you've got several really important people walking in and out. Specifically, you've got judges walking in and out. You've got contested hearings. You have people that feel a lot of emotion towards each other, all piling into the same building. Oftentimes, you have criminals that are facing pending charges. To install a 24-hour surveillance system on the front of the courthouse doesn't strike me as being something that's overly expensive and kind of just a no-brainer for the court to have.
Now, to be clear, there is video that was released. It shows the immediate aftermath of the shooting. This was obtained by WLX, but that video doesn't capture the actual shooting itself. So if you don't have video evidence of the shooting, does that severely impact a prosecutor's case?
You have to voir dire on that issue, right? So if you're in jury selection, one of the things you're going to want to ask the jurors is what kind of evidence is important to you? Witness testimony, witness accounts of what happened are evidence. And so if the jury finds that testimony to be credible, it can be just as compelling as a video. But again, having that direct evidence is always going to be the prosecutor's first choice.
And you also have to wonder who else was there, the timing of this. I mean, they happen at all points right outside the courthouse after they finalized the divorce. You can put two and two together, I think, for prosecutors. But listen, she's innocent. She is innocent until proven guilty, and the prosecution still has to prove their case. Now, you asked me an important question. You asked what would have led to this happening, right? So what could have possibly provoked Tanya to allegedly kill James in this, abrupt execution-style manner? Well, it all goes back to their initial divorce filing, which seemed to stem from one particularly shocking alleged incident of violence. So according to the Daily Mail, last year on December 27th, Tanya had apparently filed for divorce from her 62-year-old husband, James, citing a history of domestic violence. And what James allegedly did to her is so horrific. According to WDAM, James had allegedly shot Tanya in the face on September 1st of last year. And he was even indicted on a felony charge of aggravated assault. Tanya actually talked about this in a video that she posted to Facebook earlier this month.
When I get to thinking about when somebody purposely and willfully shoots you in the face, regardless of the other stuff, regardless of what kind of rounds it is or whatever, they purposely try to harm you, cause harm upon you. So again, where's the empathy and compassion for those individuals that you inflict harm upon?
And her daughter apparently posted a video to TikTok explaining in further detail what allegedly happened that day. And just a fair warning, this is pretty horrific.
Back in September of 2023, her husband, she's supposed to be getting a divorce, ex-husband, attempted to take her life. He did this by shooting her multiple times in the back, in the chest, shot her in the head, right through the eye. She lost her eye. All of the nerves in her face on the side that was shot were done for her. She's going to therapy for that, just so she can eat. Her jaw was broken. There are bullet fragments stuck in her head because they can't go in and operate on it. And they also can't scan her because she has metal rods in her from past surgeries.
So as a result of this, Tanya filed for a protective order against James, and that was approved in November, according to WDAM. James, as I mentioned, was hit with this aggravated assault charge in August, and according to the outlet, who revealed a portion of that indictment, it reads, James Ray Saucier, on or about September 1st, 2023, in Pearl River County, Mississippi, did willfully, unlawfully, purposely, and feloniously commit an aggravated assault by attempting to cause or causing bodily injury to Tanya Lindell Saucier with a deadly weapon, likely to produce death or serious bodily harm, to wit, shooting Tanya in the face and body with a Ruger 22 45 MK3 target model semi-automatic handgun and causing her to lose her right eye. Yeah. WLOX reported that James allegedly shot her once in the head, 4 times in the chest during this incident after he became reportedly upset with her while drinking. Court documents reviewed by the outlet revealed that James had called 911 to report that he shot Tanya. Now, Anthony, I got to get your take here. I mean, could Tanya's history with James be used as evidence to support her defense? And to be clear, right, he wasn't found guilty as far as my understanding. He was merely criminally charged. But could this support some sort of, I don't know, mental health defense, extreme emotional disturbance, battered woman syndrome, heat of passion? Anything work here?
Absolutely. I think the defense has to lean into the history between the two of these people. You know, you talked about her lawyer being an eyewitness and that he felt that this was cold-blooded murder. I think any argument that this is a self-defense case is probably going to be difficult for the defense to put forth in front of a jury. I think that they're going to have to lean into the nature of the relationship, a heat of passion standpoint, or potentially even some sort of battered woman syndrome, psychological disorder similar to that of PTSD.
In other words, you're saying downgrade this from murder to, you know, in other states we would see it like manslaughter, right? In the sense that, is that what we're talking about?
Sure. Well, if we're talking about heat of passion, then yes. If you prove to the fact finder that the murder was committed out of the heat of passion, then under the law in Mississippi, that'll reduce the charge from murder to manslaughter, which is second degree. And in that case, rather than facing life in prison, she'd be facing up to 20 years. But that's an entirely different argument than some sort of battered woman syndrome psychological disorder where you might be using that to establish she didn't have the intent to kill.
Ooh, interesting. So talk to me about that, because let's talk about the time frame here, right? We mentioned the protective order. We mentioned this is right on the heels of getting divorced, which is a very emotional time, particularly for somebody who was allegedly shot in the face by the guy that she was divorcing. How does that work in a potential battered woman's defense? And is it a defense in Mississippi to the best of your understanding?
So battered woman syndrome is not a defense. It's not a legally recognized defense. But what you would argue, and its success rate, that's still an ongoing study right now. But it is oftentimes compared to some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder where you can snap and not recognize the consequences of your actions due to the history of abuse, due to the history of trauma that you had obtained throughout the time of a relationship. I mean, PTSD aside, if she's sitting in the courtroom and she doesn't have an eye and the defense can establish that that is the result of the victim, James Ray, shooting her in the eye, I would argue just jury nullification. That is where you're not making any legal arguments. You are just playing to the emotions of the jury of,
sure,
maybe this happened and yes, we're here, but we shouldn't be here because look at the guy that we're talking about and look what she had to go through.
You can't argue that to the jury.
Absolutely.
That's improper.
Any good prosecutors will file a motion in limine to keep that argument out. You've got to find the way as a defense to make it relevant. And whether you're arguing it specifically or not, the jury's going to hear and see that she's been shot in the eye. And I do think that's important in this case.
The other way of looking at it is with the existence of, the alleged violence, the protective order, you could say this looks premeditated. Like look at the past. She knew exactly what she was doing, when she was going to do it, how she was going to do it, where she was going to do it. I could see the prosecutors using that as a weapon against her, though.
That's a great point, Jesse. And this case is so distinguishable from the other sort of battered woman syndrome cases where they're in the household, a knife is used. I mean, she had a firearm on her person at the time. So I've got to think that there was at least some planning before this crime was committed, which is really going to go against any sudden passion argument. And again, to your point, shows premeditation, or could be argued it shows premeditation.
Now, Tanya took to Facebook in October of last year for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and she shared pictures of her injuries from this shooting. The caption read in part, just an FYI, there's no struggle over a gun when one person is control of it. Examples given in pics. Another thing, don't just let anybody apply pressure after they've tried to kill you. I may be blind in my right eye and deaf in my right ear, but you best believe I still have 2 legs to send on and a heart that is full of God's blessings and the love of my family and friends. I am blessed. And as a result of what is a truly horrific incident, Tanya said she had to get a prosthetic eye. In April of this year, Tanya even posted this video on her page.
Today makes 7 months since my so-called husband tried to kill me. You're going to pay for what you did to me, and you're going to leave me the hell alone. That's what you're going to do, because I ain't going nowhere. You best believe it.
Now, whether or not Tanya was intending to kill James at that point, it's unclear, it has to be proven, but in hindsight, it is quite chilling. I mean, Anthony, what do you make of statements like that? How does it factor into a legal case?
I don't know that anyone could really foresee those statements being relevant at a later murder trial. This is just not something that you're seeing all the time, especially not a murder right in front of the courthouse. But from a prosecutor's perspective, goes to show that she's reconciling with the fact that she was abused. And I would use it to further establish, like you said, premeditation and a recognition that doing what she did in front of the courthouse would be illegal.
Yeah. Tanya says James was trying to kill her in that incident, the eye incident, but James' family has maintained that shooting was an act of self-defense. James' family also told the Sun-Herald that he was a good man, a fisherman, hunter, retired from working for a company called Ingalls Shipbuilding. And the couple's niece posted to Facebook in defense of James, saying that Tanya had threatened him multiple times in one incident of which we may have just played out for you. In the niece's post, she says in part, she has threatened his life so many times in a rambling Facebook post, and all anyone could do was watch. I know there are 2 sides to every story, but I will never believe hers. My uncle was not an abusive man. He was not perfect by any means, but he wasn't an evil or hateful person. He would give the shirt off of his back to a stranger. My family was not out to get her. We all just tried to stay the hell out of her way. I don't know exactly what happened that day in September when they both were shot, but I do know that he would not have just come home from his doctor's appointment and try to kill her. She took him away from his 7 grandsons. She stole his chance to meet his new grandchild that will be born in any day now. His brother and sisters, nieces and nephews, and many friends loved him and will miss him immensely. And what we can gather from Tanya, because now we're seeing different sides here, she was a U.S. Army veteran. This is according to the Sun-Herald. And she had previously run a business called Lil Birdie's and Flower Bed Nursery before that shut down. Prior to that, she operated Davis's Trading Post. This was a small antique furniture store that closed as well. She was very active on her Facebook account, often posting about traumas that she said she'd experienced and reflecting on the effects of menopause, how experiencing domestic violence had affected her. But while her posts often portrayed her as a woman in pain, some of her family held different views. Tanya's brother, Wordy Carroll, told the Sun-Herald that after she returned from duty, she was, quote, not as rational. He said she suffered from mood swings and that the family actually told James to stay away from her. Anthony, that's really interesting, the different perspectives from family members.
I imagine that during the negotiations in this case, the prosecution will want to look at both sides and find out wherein lies the truth. But in a trial perspective, I would expect to hear from both sides and hear both accounts of what the nature of their relationship was like.
So let me just put a bow on this because prior to his death, James was supposed to go to trial on that aggravated assault charge in March. As for Tanya, she is currently charged with first-degree murder, currently being held at the Lenore Royal Criminal Justice Center. It's not clear when she will have her next court appearance, but she could potentially face a maximum sentence of life in prison if she's convicted. Anthony Osso, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time, sir.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. It's always a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.